have you all here tonight, so I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, friends.
Hey, I know. We're also friends off stage.
We are.
Yes.
We are.
This is just so exciting.
I know. I love that now we're friends with microphones. It's
That's-
very exciting.
I don't know if that's good or not.
Well, we'll see. The great thing about talking about hauntings is that you just never know.
That's true.
It's the power of mystery.
That
Very
is
much.
true. Were we starting with a reading, or did you want to warm up with some questions first, and then we can flow into
That's
it?
yeah. We didn't decide which we were starting with, did
We
we? Yes.
didn't.
No, we didn't. What do you, the audience, want? Do you want to hear a reading, or do you want us to launch right into questions? Reading.
Oh,
All right.
Goodness. Okay.
Okay, I hope
That's
so.
true,
That's a great thought. All right, so I'm going to go to my favorite introduction section about America's Most Gothic, something that I feel is pretty immersive. So I just have to find the right page. Thank you. I'm still learning what the page numbers are on this.
Right.
This is brand new. This is part of my release week, by the way. So yeah, this
Yes.
is part of my book tour. So I'm so excited. Yay.
We feel so lucky to have you on
Well,
on the book tour.
This was such an
Yes.
important thing, so I wanted to be here and get a chance for you guys to talk about your wonderful ghostwriting too. By the way, not ghostwriting. So
No, we do that anyway.
you also go well when I'm saying ghostwriters. It's like I have to be like writers about ghosts,
Right.
not ghost writing. But that's a whole other
Writers,
thing.
not ghostwriters.
Right. Okay, the crossroads. We're at 250. Okay, sorry. I thought I had this marked in a different copy of the book, and it sold at my last event, and I realized after the fact, I was like, oh, that's the one I had it marked.
Oops.
Oops. I promise I'm a professional.
I'm pretty sure I've done that too, actually.
I promise I'm a professional.
Sure, we're all professionals.
We're all, yeah, absolutely. So each of the sections in America's Most Gothic is dealing with a different trope that is common within Gothic literature. So what we're doing is we are comparing real life things that happened and real situations to the tropes of a Gothic novel. And we'll get into explaining what we mean by Gothic a little bit. But at least in this case, you can kind of see the immersive environment we're trying to put you into as we tell you a ghost story. So this is from my Crossroads section. So a lot of times you will find in a lot of folklore, urban legend, and ghost lore, you'll find spirits at crossroads. And I wanted to dive into that as a concept. And all of our sections in this book start with a quote from my favorite guy, Edgar Allan Poe. That's the picture around my neck. Edgar Allan Poe is the reason for the season, as it were. And he really does define a lot of American folklore, and American ghost lore comes off of some of his horror tropes. So we start with a quote from his poem Dreamland. By a route obscure and lonely, haunted by ill angels only, where an Eidolon named Night on a black throne reigns upright, I have wandered home but newly from this ultimate dim Thule. You walk alone down an overgrown path. You speed too close around a bend. A figure suddenly appears. Startled, you do not know which way to go, and your heart races, pounding in your ears. Is this screaming pause where two paths diverge in a wood? You have to think quickly. Your fate may be decided by a hair's breadth. Will you journey forward with the dead or the living? Are you able to continue along the road, or do you careen off into some unfathomable distance? In Poe's final stanza of his poem Dreamland, in the narrator's liminal state between the nightmare of day-to-day material existence and the yearning for the sublime, the narrator confronts an Eidolon, a Greek term for a spectral look-alike of the human form, while wandering back from Thule, the northernmost part, the outer extremes of Greek cartography, the edge of the world. The Eidolon specter confronts the wanderer on their path home. Spirits at crossroads are common in folklore and indeed in Gothic literature, with a nod to all the classical Greek myths where ominous figures lurked at forks in the road, marking pivotal points in the protagonist's saga. Hecate, after all, is the Greek goddess of the crossroads and witchcraft. By the wayside, spirits are icons, omens, warnings, and road signs personified. The historic fear of brigands and highwaymen lurking along carriage paths, a popular band of ghost lore from the 1700s on, simply transformed and anthropomorphized with technology and its new concerns. Any spirit at a crossroads is meant to give us pause, no matter the era. Washington Irving's famed Headless Horseman, gleaned from local Dutch-infused Tarrytown ghost lore Irving heard during his youth, is himself a figure at a crossing, a spirit treading paths, seeking and searching, hoping to reunite with his head, pausing iconically over a bridge to strike fear into those who wronged him. As horses gave way to automobiles, the narrative changed and the language adapted, but the core part of the storytelling remained unaltered. That sense of caution and minding your way across a bridge, a sharp turn, or across an intersection remains, as does the awareness of your surroundings. Are you now a stranger in a strange land? I travel constantly for conventions. I think I put on 6,000 miles in the past week. Lectures, presentations, research. I drive thousands of miles every year. The growing predominance of roadside shrines, noting the exact place where life was lost, is a widening development. Considering these markers are outside the prescribed boundaries of a cemetery, and seeing that there are no remains at these memorials, it's noting the act of loss, the psychic imprint, a marker of trauma, a reminder to those fellow travelers to take care, and a plea to remember loved ones lost in one shattering moment at that specific spot. Whether ghost stories are attached to those roadside markers, I can't yet say. I haven't yet seen or heard enough anecdotal data, and these shrines are too fresh to have become long-time lore. These stories may evolve in time, but every time I pass one, I'm reminded that everything could change in a blink of an eye. I don't look too close. I can't. It isn't safe to turn and stare as a driver. Those markers are figures that remain only safe to engage with out of the corner of your eye as you remain focused on the road ahead. As a passenger, you can drink in their stories and wonder about the lives they lived. An interaction with a spirit at the crossroads can change your life. It may very well save your life. One spirit's tragedy is a reminder for you to live and to take care around the bend. The following stories are omens sharing a similar theme. Slow down and heed the warnings ahead. Thank you. So that goes into a story which actually happened to me, which was an actual motorcycle ghost of southwestern Ohio, where I grew up, changed my behavior to this day. We saw a light, and it's this urban legend thing, right? It's this urban legend thing where you go to a bend in the road. We all know this. You go to a side of the road and you flash your lights 3 times and something's supposed to appear.
Right.
This is a common thing. We did this not thinking anything was going to show up. We're like going to do this because there's nothing to do in southwestern Ohio in the middle of nowhere. And so we were kids and we'd been rehearsing Little Shop of Horrors, funnily enough. And we decided that we were going to go after a rehearsal. We were going to go and find the motorcycle ghost, right? And he's this longtime lore, but the lore had changed. Some people said it was from the 70s, that he'd sped too fast down a hill and he'd careened off, and he was driving, speeding away from either a lover who jilted him or turned down his marriage proposal, one or the other. Again, this is common ghost lore. This is common urban legend. There's one of these kinds of things just about in every state, just about around every really steep hill or really sharp turn. This repeats itself, right? So we go to this bend in the road, and so my friend Erin is driving. She's driving this really cool red Jeep, and she goes onto the berm in the road, and it's the middle of nowhere. Everything is very brightly moonly lit. There is a very spooky looking house at the very top of the hill. So I was like, all right, well, this tracks. And she flashed her lights 3 times. And then after about 30 seconds, a light appeared. A single light, diffuse headlight, appeared at the top of the hill.
Oh.
And we were like, no. No.
Wow.
No. And all of us did the closing our eyes, opening our eyes, closing our eyes, opening our eyes. All of us were like, you see that, right? So we were very good kids. There was no substance abuse that was happening in this. We were all straight A students. I was not going to let anything, I was valedictorian. I wasn't going to let anything mess it up. So we were very, very completely sober. And all of us were like, wait, what? And then it comes down the hill. And then rather than going down the dip in the hill, it just floats over the dip in the hill towards our Jeep. And just as we were like, then it dissipates. And we sort of have a breath of relief, right? But then as that light would have passed the car, there's a loud crash on the top of the car, like a car crash. And I have never screamed so loud in my life. I have never had my heart feel like it was going to burst out of my own body. And Aaron is immediately tires spitting side of the road, you know, there was no like sidewalk. This was all just the very rural. So spitting turf, and we speed towards the civilization, some place with a parking lot, which was 20 miles away. And we get out of the car and we look at the top because I was like, that had to leave a mark, right? Nothing on the top of the car. And we're like, what? And we will never know that, but my mind has to make that mean something, right?
Right.
Because the whole point of urban legends and folklore is that it has to mean something. So for me, I was like, that was a warning. That was a warning to not like go hunting where you don't belong. Don't open a door that you don't necessarily know you can close. Also, it's not safe to be out. We were also at a very unsafe place where somebody couldn't really have seen us because there was no real side of the road there. And for me, it felt so much in my heart for all of us. It felt like such a warning. And to this day, this happened when I was a teenager. This happened in 1996, the year before I graduated. And to this day, if I do something distracted on the road, or to this day, if I'm just not really paying attention, or I speed too fast down a hill, or too sharp around a corner, I apologize to the motorcycle ghost.
Wow.
I do, because I feel like he warned us to take care.
Right.
That's how I had to take it from there. And so I feel like for me, the magic of ghost lore is, what do the ghosts tell the living?
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a good thing we have questions written down because I don't even know what to say after that. However, that actually is a pretty good segue because we wanted to ask you what brought you to the paranormal? How did you get here?
I was born for this.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, me too, but explain.
It's one of those things where, like, is this like just something that you just thought was neat or cool or whatever? I'm like, no, this is my entire personality. All of this, the spooky stuff, is my whole being.
Right.
I do dress like this all the time. They can attest to this.
Can't
So this
confirm.
is a whole. I basically was like, what can I do for a job that means this is my work uniform? And so ghost tour guide and folklorist felt like the right move, you know, but only spooky folklore. I mean, I love all folklore, but spooky folklore is the real thing. I think it was, I had weird experiences when I was a kid, and I think for me, rather than being scared by them, I wanted to kind of relish them. I had a visitation of my late great-grandmother, the woman I am named for, when I was about 6 years old, and it was actually very powerful and beautiful. And I think her appearance kind of saved my life, because I had like 105-degree fever when I was 6 years old, and my mom was about to take me to the ER. And evidently I went into some sort of rhapsodic ode, and I started talking to God, about God and the angels, using like liturgical words that I had not been taught as a 6-year-old. And my mom was like, "That's real weird." And she's a nurse, and she's just like, "I don't, like my child is in a state right now, like but my fever broke. And then we got the phone call that my great-grandmother had just passed. I'm named for her. And we had a really special connection. And so I kind of think that was Grandma saving my life and coming to say goodbye, because it all happened at the same time that she passed. Like right in those 10 minutes was all going down at the same time. So for me, I was like, you know what? I mean, ghost lore, and that for me was like grounding me in something that I talk about all the time as a ghost tour guide, in something that's like dark tourism, right? The idea that like I'm not interested in doing what is known as a ghost hunt. I do not hunt people. Ghosts are people. Right. We do not hunt people in a civilized society. Right. And so paranormal investigator is the term I'm much more comfortable with. Yes. And I understand how that came to be, because you are seeking out something. Yes, absolutely. But I really feel that the idea that ghosts are people, and that is someone's loved one of some degree, or could be, or is a manifestation of a collective group of loved ones that were done wrong, and all the ways in which folklore and urban legend crop up around something that was maybe really true once, but it becomes sort of a cipher at this other point. So that from 6 years old, I was like, yeah, that kind of opened a door. I was at a liminal space between life and death myself at that moment. And it really did open stuff up that I did not understand at all until I was much later, and that I didn't really embrace fully in terms of like an actual kind of energetic connection or any of the other woo stuff that has happened to me. I was like,
No, we love the woo stuff.
you know, we love the woo stuff.
Do the
That
woo
is
stuff.
but it was a process of learning to kind of trust that and trust my own senses that don't know what to make of these things.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, you were born for this.
I was born.
From
I was born
age
for this. Yeah.
6 on.
It was like no. Great grandma opened a door and was like, "Okay,
No,
all right,
Here you go, Leanna. Spooky stuff.
spooky stuff."
Congrats.
Yeah, this was then furthered by the teacher when I was around 9 years old or so, who was like, "You're weird. You're gonna like this," and hands me the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh my
So
God.
it really was helped along by the fact that like. Really, no one really knew what to make of me, but boy, would they point out an old Victorian home, and I would be like, yes,
Correct.
that is home. And then my parents are like, no, it is not a home. But I was just like, evidently, they told me a story about Dark Shadows when it was on syndication that I like walked up to the TV and like pet the screen. When the initial montage of the
Wow.
haunted house was on, it just like felt like, and the Addams family felt like my family, and my parents are very normal, so they were like, "What family are you talking about?" I love you, Mom and Dad.
Family in your head.
They're the best. They're, they're the most supportive. They don't really get it, but they love me anyway.
It's
Bless
like
them.
it's like the essence of goth just like went into you when you were born.
It's like
and then you
right,
just
exactly. It's like the inverse. It's like the inverse Marilyn Munster, right? Like where she's the normal one. It's like I have a normal family and I'm the Addams, you know,
Yeah.
in it. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm the weird one that wears
See,
black.
there
all
we
the
go.
time.
We all, you know, there's one in every bunch.
That's incredible.
So the title of your first book, for nonfiction book, I should say, she's also a fiction writer, is A Haunted History of Invisible Women, True Stories of America's Ghosts. And it also ties into this one, too. So you kind of touched on it, but what is a ghost to you? And certainly in terms in like relating to the books, because not everything you write about is a ghost, especially in
Right.
the first book.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about the different types of hauntings. And we'll talk about something that's would be known in ghost circles or paranormal investigator circles as a intelligent haunting versus a residual haunting. So you have an intelligent haunting is the idea that there's an entity, a being, possibly a person, that is interactive with someone in the moment, with someone who is living in a specific space. For residual haunting, there's a corollary term called place memory. The idea that something that beautiful or terrible that happened at that place is imprinted onto that space. And so we start out, Andrea, my co-author, and I, we start out our debut nonfiction with the worst industrial accident that has ever happened in this country, and it's the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911. We start with that. That is on our ghost tours, and we start there in this book, in our first book, not because we're trying to do anything but talk about how history is horrifying. And there is a haunting there because it should be always remembered as a site of great tragedy. Now, there have been residual haunting things that have cropped up there. People who are living have smelled smoke. They have heard screams. They have smelled the smell of burning flesh. They have seen shadows fall across the window from people who jumped from the 8th, 9th, 10th floors. It was a horrific situation where in about the span of 10 minutes, 146 lives were lost. 123 of them were women as young as 14 years old. And all of New York was watching this unfold. This happened just right outside Washington Square Park. And it became this rallying cry because the girls were locked in. This was a common practice for sweatshop labor, and still is in other parts of the world. And it still is sometimes in this country as well. Labor laws are kind of constantly having to be fought for. People have bled and died for labor laws. And for safety protocols. I mean, all of these exit signs, all of this stuff, all of this is because of other events that happened that took lives. So we're not interested in telling you something to scare you. And from the ghost lore angle of this, we think that their deaths are the rallying cry to keep talking about the incident. And I use it as a real rallying cry to make sure that you never, ever let your labor laws or let your building safety codes ever lapse. Because that is up to, we have to fight for each other to make sure that we are safe.
Right.
And that's the rallying cry of because otherwise the spectral memory of all of these men and women, then it doesn't mean they died for nothing if we're not still fighting for them.
Right.
So for me, a ghost, a ghost, usually I like to refer to as an actual being, like somebody someone that was a person, and I don't necessarily know who that was, but I try to find out who that was. And usually, if it's in a house where there's a specific haunting that repeats, usually the owners of the house or the owners of the museum will have an idea of who this could be. It could be X, Y, and Z happening. And then some people will see something, and it will be either a coded male figure or a coded female figure or a child of some kind, and then they'll piece those things together. But everybody's spectral experience is very different. So what I understand as a ghost can also be something that we're just kind of projecting onto a space too, because that's where urban legend happens too. It becomes this sort of cyclical nature, where if you believe in something enough, the Tibetan word for it is a tulpa, it's a thought form. Yeah. If you believe in something enough, it will create its own situation. It will create its own haunting. This is very powerful. So and you all as from your own paranormal investigating, you know that you have to bring skepticism in first, because we will invent a haunting like that.
Oh, yeah.
We get ourselves psyched out.
Humans just want to make hauntings. This is just what we do.
Yeah. We want to explain things, and if that means a ghost explains my experience, well, there's a ghost.
Then it's a ghost. Yeah. Incredible.
So, I mean, I try never to tell people what to believe. I try never to tell, because I am not here to tell you that ghosts do or do not exist. I happen to be a believer, but at the same time, I don't need someone else to believe for my experiences to still be valid in my experiences. Right. And so I hate proselytizing of any kind, so I'm not going to do that about ghost lore. I'm not going to insist anyone believe. All I ask is the respect of folks allowing me my personal experiences as my lived truth.
Right.
And is if a ghost ends up being a physics equation that we haven't solved yet, magnificent. That's awesome. Yeah. I don't think that science and ghost lore are at all antithetical. I mean, when you start looking into like theoretical physics, like that's sure phasing in and out of walls sure sounds like a ghost story to me. So I think we can get there, and I think that's really exciting. But a lot of folks, and I also understand people don't like to sit with the stuff that they don't know.
Of course,
we want answers to things, and I'm sorry, but our books will not give you answers, because we're not trying to tell you what to think. We're asking you questions. How do we talk about women alive and dead? That's the prompt of A Haunted History of Invisible Women. It's just women ghost stories, usually tracked into different stereotypes or limited roles that women have been allowed to be in through history.
Right.
And their ghost lore. So it's how do we talk about these women alive and dead, and does the ghost lore overturn the stereotype, or does it confirm it or reaffirm it? Or are we so desperate to put something into this that it has become this limited space? With America's Most Gothic, we're like, wow, how do the tropes of Gothic literature that are so embroiled in sort of our sense of what is scary and what we can trust our senses for or not, how is that reaffirming a lot of actual takes on historic events? So Andrea, my co-author, she uses the example, well, she's gone on several different ghost tours around the nation, and she's like, I've encountered 5 different takes on a mad woman in an attic with a door covered over by a tapestry, and she's like, guys, that's Jane Eyre.
Right.
That's Jane Eyre.
Oh, we have
like,
that. Yeah.
But we have. I mean, so are you actually, who was this lady, or are you just putting it there because you just assume that's a creepy house, and so somebody had to be trapped in the attic up there? These are the questions that we're kind of like prodding our own history and our own current moment to try to at least have a discussion about, because I think it's worth discussing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you write about women a lot, if not almost exclusively. So what is it about, I mean, this feels like kind of an obvious question, but what is it about women's stories that you feel needs to be written about, and like the specific ones that you chose for A Haunted History of Invisible Women? Like, why those ones specifically, and like what do they represent for you?
Andrea and I chose now in terms of like my co-author and I work for a company called Burrows of the Dead. It's New York's top-rated ghost tour company, and Andrea Janes, my co-author, founded that company, and I was her first guide other than herself. And I've been with the company for over 10 years now. And she founded it on the principles of respect for the dead and accurate history. Because she was taking these other ghost tours where they were just like, yeah, this happened at this time or whatever, and then didn't pin a date, or then got the facts of actual history wrong. And she's like, y'all, whatever about the ghost, but at least get your actual history where New York City has a deed for that building for this particular year. You can find that out. And she just got really upset about the sloppiness of history and a lot of ghost tours and a lot of, and a lot of ghost writing about ghosts too.
We're
and
just
like
railing over here like,
I know, it
my
doesn't have
biggest
to be
pet
wrong.
peeve.
You can get your facts right. And in fact, it makes the ghost story more interesting if you get your facts straight and correct as much as is humanly possible.
Right.
Now, it's hard sometimes, especially when you're talking about women's history, because a lot of times in the 19th century, which is a lot of codified ghost lore is very connected to the 19th century because of how much it was a pervasive time where people were writing paranormal things. And also our concept of what the ghost looked like, the earliest types of like spirit photography, all of that's coming out in the 19th century, and this was completely usually faked. And so the staged idea of the lady ghost was such a sort of a early Hollywood invention. And so a lot of our thoughts about a historic spectral lady was very much informed by the art of the time, and then going into photography and filmmaking. So, but finding out the actual women, in the 19th century, a lot of times if you did get married and you were encouraged societally to get married, then your name would be subsumed entirely into the male. You would become Mrs. male name, first name, last name. And so finding the maiden names were very difficult for a lot of people who were trying to trace back. Even there's an example that Andrea had about the Red Lady of Huntingdon College. And she called the office and she's like, who is this woman really? And they're like, well, what is her maiden name? And it was a strange presumption in 2022. The idea that they're, and it just kind of stunned her. And she said, I have no idea. That's why I'm asking you. So this is just, sometimes there's sort of a dead end, as it were, no pun intended, for these kinds of things. And so I think for us, we were like, as women who know that women very often do not get noted as, or allowed to be their full selves historically. So, in the intersection of class and race and all of these other things comes into play of how much were you allowed to be yourself, your full autonomous self. And the ghost lore kind of can speak to those questions. In some cases, there are now very, very famous ghosts who had no real impact on society at the time, who would have been completely forgotten. But for the fact that Gertrude Treadwell lived to 93 years old, and she was this sort of spooky old lady at a house in the middle of Manhattan that was still like a Victorian row house when everything else around it was completely modernizing, and she just kept her 1823 row house exactly as Papa would have liked it, which is also kind of creepy. But
awkward,
it
problematic.
is a complete a museum capsule from the 1870s, and she lived into the 1920s. So it's this very interesting house that's out of time. And because she lived there and made these very specific choices about keeping this house immaculately 1870s, it has things that are unique that other houses just bulldozed. And it's a treasure trove for specific architecture historians who are like, oh my God, this is a beehive bread oven to the side of the mantle and the downstairs fireplace. This is so exciting. All of these were bricked over by X amount of years or whatever. So it's just these simple choices that were eccentric at the time. But then because of her ghost lore, now it's this famous house museum. And Gertrude is very much a part of every discussion, and she absolutely haunts that house. And one of my favorite stories is there's a story of a guy who wanted to come to the museum one day, and he rang the bell, because you walk up the stairs and you ring the bell to be admitted by staff. And so this woman in a beautiful Victorian gown opens the door. She says, I'm so sorry, we are not taking visitors today, and closes the door on him. And he's like, okay, that's weird. The website didn't say that, but okay. Comes back the next day, does the same thing, rings the doorbell. A woman in a polo shirt and jeans answers the door, and he says, oh, I'm so glad you're open today. The woman in costume yesterday said you were closed. And the docent said, we don't wear costumes. And he's like, And he's like freaked out, and she's like, what was she wearing? And he describes this very specific brown taffeta dress. And now the docent's freaked out, because that dress of Gertrude Treadwell's is not on display. So this is not a man who was punking her. He couldn't have known that. And so he walks in the door, and like she's just kind of keeps quiet, because she's like, I kind of need to see where this is going. This could be one for the record books, you know. And he walks in and he sees a portrait of Gertrude Treadwell, and he goes, "That's the woman that opened the door. That's the woman that opened the door. That's the woman that opened the door." And so, I mean, sometimes Gertrude just doesn't want to have visitors. And that has not changed in 150 some years.
Completely fair.
You know, I mean,
Totally.
relatable,
Yeah,
relatable. Like, you know.
Absolutely.
So I think that for us, it was so exciting to see how sometimes women's choices have led to very, very interesting results. And it really was Gertrude's choice to remain in that house, and then become part of ghost lore that was being created before she even died. Like, there was a newspaper article about her referring to her as a ghost. She was still alive. So
That's just rude.
It's rude.
Hello,
It's rude.
I'm still here.
But we all
Jeez.
do. Like, we all have stories of like that one rundown house in that one part of town, and that, you know, that people have a narrative about.
That's true.
So I think, so for us, it was, you know, women have very often had the power of their own narrative taken from them. So that's the core of the first book. And we continue it in America's Most Gothic, because who has control of the narrative is the core question of the levers of power upon which the Gothic operates. And the Gothic is always dealing with power and power structures. Who has it? Who gets to wield it? Who is under the thumb of it? And the Gothic firmly presses that thumb on the pulse of the anxieties of the age in which it is written. And we are in an anxious time right now. And so there is a resurgence of Gothic fiction. There is a resurgence of Gothic storytelling. It is no surprise to me that my beloved Guillermo del Toro has a Frankenstein adaptation coming out right now.
So excited.
So excited, you know.
Yes.
So this is a rife time, because in times of conflict and great anxiety, that is when the Gothic flourishes, because the Gothic is a way for us to work out the things that scare us and make us feel like, are we crazy? Because with the level of misinformation and disinformation that's actively happening, I feel like we're constantly being gaslit as a global society right now by various different aspects. And so we constantly have to be fact-checking absolutely everything, even with the best of intentions. That is the stuff of a Gothic novel, of, are you being told the truth about things?
Right.
Yes.
So, and that goes into like the idea of being believed as a woman, or being believed as a worker in a mine shaft that is going to collapse. And these striking men in the Hoosac Tunnel in North Adams, Massachusetts, they were saying, listen, this is unsafe, this is unsafe. And then there was a mine collapse. They were forced back to work, and a mine collapse happened, and then ghost stories happened right after, because that they told you so. And then yet at that point, they still were forced into this dynamic, similar to the striking workers that struck the year before the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Those workers were trying to warn people too. So I love the concept then of ghosts as very often showing up to warn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
So, were there any stories you wish you could have included in the first book? And is that how we got the second book?
Yes and yes. Yes and yes. We were very limited in Kensington. As a publisher, has been lovely to work with, but they didn't really know what to do with the first book. They were like, we love this narrative, and Citadel Press has been doing nonfiction they're an imprint within Kensington, based in New York. And Kensington is the last independent New York publisher left. All the rest of the New York publishers are all major corporate conglomerates.
Oh, wow.
And so Kensington is the last independent house, which is really, it's lovely to be with them, because it still sort of has a close family kind of feel. But they also have the distribution help of Penguin Random House, which is great. Which is great for getting these books into to wonderful places like Book Suite right outside. So with Kensington was like, we're not really sure what to do with this, but we love sort of the women's narrative of this as lifting up hidden histories. They're like, the hidden history aspect of this is really great, but we're not gonna let it be a really, really long book. We're like gonna keep it to like 100,000 words. And so we tried to keep it to that. And then, of course, inevitably, both Andrea and I had several stories each that we did not get a chance to finish and put in, because we also were trying to kind of do a range, and we didn't want ones that were going to be too similar. We wanted a real range to kind of try to show the range of, especially for the first book, the range of women's experiences. It's not all bad. We have some really fun ones. We have some really silly ones in there that are delightful. Andrea has a great Joan Rivers story in there about her haunted apartment. I have a great story about Ma Green, who was the first female steamboat captain. She got her steamboat pilot's license in the 1860s, and she was just, out there just being amazing. And so I love all of those things, and I was so glad that the first book did well enough that about, in the window where our option clause in publishing was about to kind of be up for discussion of like, the Kensington had the right of refusal for our next nonfiction. And so we pitched more Haunted History of Invisible Women, because we were like, we have more we didn't get to. And they were like, here's the thing, we're not going to do a series. We're not interested in doing a series because we don't want the second book to compete with the first book. That's going to stand on its own. What about this whole section in your proposal package that's like Gothic ghosts? And they were like, Gothic is very trendy right now. And we were like, and I was like, oh my God, for the first time in my life, I'm trendy. Oh, this is very exciting. For the first time in my life, I can ride a trend that is also very much me. And so I was very excited to say, yes, please, I would love to do a Gothic themed book. But then we had to get our heads around what does that mean? Right. Because I've been talking about the importance of Gothic literature as a narrative construct for 20 years. Andrea understood the concept, but was not quite as steeped in the tropes and things. So she had to kind of do her own like crash course on reading a whole lot of the Gothic classics, and being like, okay, no, this is very much paralleling the times we are living in, and there's a lot to say here. And also, she realized that all of the women that she had not been able to put into the first one, she's like, oh, I have a story about a woman who was buried behind a brick wall. That's very Gothic. So that's very House of Usher. So let's, let that. So I mean, exactly so. All of these are all mentioned in the book because they do parallel all of these other things. So that's how that came to be, and it's been really delightful because there's a lot of range within the Gothic. Even though I think that there has to be a metric for what constitutes a Gothic novel, there really is a lot of flexibility within that. For me, there's 3 tenets that have to be in play for it to be considered a Gothic literary work. Setting is character, psychological focus, and dread is the engine. The engine of the Gothic is dread. It is not jump scares and action-packed stuff. A slow burn, creeping dread is how a Gothic novel proceeds. And so that's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's a slow boil where the reader is the frog. And so all of the Gothic tropes can kind of fit within there, but then you have these other things of, okay, setting is character, but what kind of setting? Are you in a haunted house, or are you on a windswept moor? Are you in a sinking ship? Are you in a bayou? And all of these things have very different feels to them. And then psychological focus, you're really in the headspace of the main protagonists. And whether that is a reliable or an unreliable narrator is my favorite question of that psychological focus. And of course, going back to the American Gothic versus a lot of the classic Gothics are sort of imports from Europe. But for the American Gothic tradition, Edgar Allan Poe was doing great things with the unreliable narrator and making one question one's own senses. And so that becomes a dialogue with the character itself and because then the reader themselves. So it can kind of become very metatextual in that regard too. So the Gothic it has a lot of breathing room because it's very squirrely. It defies complete constraints, more so than just about any other genre, which is sometimes why folks have been puzzled by it as a literary genre, and very often because it is big emotions, big feelings, big mental decline sometimes, or in its own world, why literary critics haven't always known exactly what to do with it too.
Ooh, that's true. Yeah.
Very true.
So, in true Leanna fashion, you answered all the questions.
It's just it's just a little bit of psychic stuff, you know.
Well,
And like,
Yeah.
So you mentioned 3 basic tenets of Gothic literature. What are maybe like a couple like standard tropes, and maybe how did you wind them a little bit through this book?
I'll give you the 7 sections of our book that gives
Yeah,
you
perfect.
all these Gothic tropes. So we start with part 1. Part 1 is a wild and foreboding landscape, so their setting is character, right? Part 2 is a woman on a journey. Because women in peril is the core of a lot of Gothic literature. Think of those 1970s and 1980s paperbacks.
Ooh, yeah.
Women with great hair and a long nightgown running from a house, beautifully painted, sometimes with a candelabra, sometimes just, hand to forehead. But those they're beautiful, they're windswept, they're very often very alluring. But in those texts is often very much a story of a woman trying to figure out her own path,
Right.
her own way through, her own way out of the house. And honestly, when you think about it, when you think about the domesticity that women have been encouraged to be slotted into for so much a part of history, there is a radical notion of running from the house. And that in and of itself is a radical act. And that in and of itself is a text where the idea where the Gothic can be subversive in that regard. So A Woman on a Journey is our part 2. Our part 3 is the haunted house, because what is the journey away from or towards? Either way. So the haunted house is a staple of Gothic literature.
Very much.
And especially in American canon, I believe the best haunted house story is by Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. It is the best. I think hands down, it is the best haunted house narrative. But there's so many great other haunted house stories, but that one's just consistently
A+.
the best.
Yeah.
So part 4, The Hidden Chamber, because one of the things about Gothic literature is that usually secrets are somewhere waiting to be divulged, and generally speaking, there will be something behind or within the walls. And the idea of the house as a metaphor for the body is a big thing. So when you have a hidden chamber, what's inside of yourself that you, the reader or the protagonists, have pressed down, locked away, denied, it will come bubbling to the surface. A Mysterious Omen is our part 5, because very often there will be something that is there to warn the protagonist or there to sort of set the next stage for what's going to happen in the climactic moments. Part 6, An Open Crypt, because the idea of something coming out from a grave or going into it before dead is a crux of, when we think about Fall of the House of Usher, the idea of Madeline being buried alive is a big fear, and that's something that was a really significant concern, especially for tuberculosis patients in the 19th century. And Poe had a first-hand experience with that, whether it was his own mother. He was 2 when his mother died of tuberculosis. Then his adoptive mother, Frances Allen. That's where the Allen and Edgar Allan Poe comes from, is from the Allen family, his adoptive family. And so when Frances Allen died of tuberculosis, that gutted him. They were very close. He was not close with his adoptive father. And then when his wife, Virginia, she passed from tuberculosis. Yeah. So it's like any of the time that illness is in any of Poe's works, it is deeply felt and fraught. And so the concept and the worry of being buried alive, because for so often, like, folks would go into these various comatose states. And because the symptomology was still kind of eluding a lot of medicine, industry was going forward in the 19th century at a much higher rate than medicine was able to keep up. And so we had all these wonderful machines, but then there's still, but tuberculosis was still a great mystery until the 20th century, really. And so I think the idea of the open crypt is double in the idea of what if the buried come back. So Andrea has a great chapter on the New England vampire panic, which is a real thing.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, people really did dig up corpses, burn their hearts, and snort the heart. I'm not kidding you, as a possible tonic against vampirism or tuberculosis, either or. But it was a real thing that really happened. It's really, and it's very well documented. But it defies our modern rational thought. But at that point, folks, there was a lot of folk belief and folk medicine that was being practiced. And to be fair, there's plenty of folk medicines that are absolutely the right way. Like herbal medicine very often is a way to get to to solve a problem.
Yeah.
But I don't know, snorting hearts, not so much. But
not really. Snorting dead hearts, definitely not.
Yeah, it was, they were trying. So part 7 is a family cursed, because a lot of times the idea of Gothic literature is the idea of the family curse, and the idea that, like, we are inheriting something that was broken by not us. We are inheriting something that was broken before us by others. By what have we inherited now as a world? That is a question that the Gothic asks of its readership. What have we inherited, and what are we giving to those coming after us? So the idea of the family cursed is we focus on 2 families that have some really, really tragic things in them. But at the same time, there's also room for hope, because you can turn a curse around. You can actually break a curse. And so I kind of feel that that's the way for the chapter that I wrote that the book ends on. But we do have a little bit a denouement. We realized, we were like, oh, wow, this last one is a real downer. Like, this really sad. It's really sad. I was like, what do we gotta do something. And so I said, well, what if I just write a little thing about how the Gothic allows you to work through your emotions and find a way to escape from the house? Not every protagonist lives through every Gothic novel, but more often than not, a protagonist will find a way to survive. And I think that Gothic fiction can be a template for us being deep in our emotions and deep in our the murk of trying to find sense in a senseless world, and then get out of the haunted house before it gets you. At least that's the hope. And so so I try to end on the idea of, hey, what in this wonderful lore, or what in these moments of ghost lore can be these warnings that we heed towards a better tomorrow.
Right. Incredible.
Thanks. I have to end in hope. Like, I have to end in hope. I have to, like, I can't, I'm not interested in sitting. I want to celebrate these lives.
Of course.
I love the concept of a New Orleans jazz funeral. What is more beautiful than that? It is celebrating a life. I'm not saying that people can't grieve and that that's not a devastating process, but for me, ghost lore is like a celebration of the life that was lived. If we focus on the things that are really worth mentioning in their life, or in the case of people who are terrible, not whitewashing the terribleness.
Yes.
So, like, if someone, had a lot of nasty things to say in life, then that is what should also be noted. Like, well, these were some nasty things that were said. So that's we have to sit with that rather than rewriting history. But there's been a lot of revisionism that's coming into a lot of the discussions now, and that's, as someone who's trying to find the truth of history, that's really maddening.
Yep.
It really is. Are we okay to do a couple more questions, or do we need to move on?
Yeah, we can do a couple questions.
Okay.
I'll pass the microphone around since we are streaming, so that way it comes up on the
that's
stream.
fine.
Does anybody have any questions?
Otherwise, we will just keep yapping.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you for being here. Who are some of your favorite classic Gothic authors, and who are some of your favorite contemporary Gothic authors?
Hold on, let me get this so I can take notes for me. I'll just ask you afterward.
And this is for all 3 of you.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was
Oh,
like,
no.
Please, yeah, no, you get. I want you to answer the questions too. Here is absolutely. So for me, in terms of classics, obviously Poe is my North Star. and Shirley Jackson.
Yeah.
But I'm also, in terms of just classic Gothic texts, I think that Henry James' Turn of the Screw is the best example of an unreliable narrator outside of Poe that you'd find. That's a great example. And I think that Matthew Lewis's The Monk is one of the wildest things you could ever read. It's not great, but it's if you want an idea of like what an 18th century young man's fever dream of, I'm going to put everything lurid and terrible and wild and unexpected and absolutely taboo into this book. It's The Monk. It's an insane read, and I'm not saying I recommend it, but it's just one that just like you kind of can't unsee it. And I'm a big fan of the Brontes, all of the Brontes. Poor Anne Bronte gets no love, but The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and Agnes Grey are two beautiful books. So just saying, those books are for
justice.
I know. Yes, for Anne, absolutely. Those books are actually influences for an upcoming Gothic young adult that I have written in a fictional capacity, and I'm leaning heavily on Anne Bronte for that. So definitely the Brontes. And in terms of the modern authors working right now, Silvia Moreno Garcia has a beautiful book called Mexican Gothic.
So
It's right there in the title. I think a lot of Latina authors specifically are reclaiming the Gothic in a way that's beautiful and that is culturally relevant and is just fantastic. So there's another, we do have a recommended reading a page in the back of the book with a bunch of these names in it. And Mexican Gothic is one of them. But Isabel Cañas has a book called The Hacienda. And The Hacienda that's a haunted house novel. And it's these kinds of things of grappling with all of these tropes, but just doing it with different cultural influences. Victor Laval has a book called The Changeling, which is just a wild take on kind of a doppelganger-y kind of situation, lots of Gothic tropes in that. But I also have Victor Laval's work. I really, really love The Ballad of Black Tom, which is his take on Lovecraft, but from the perspective, as an author, he's a black man. And he's taking the fundamentally racist texts of H.P. Lovecraft, which is textual. This is not me putting it on there. It is in the text, and it was part of his life as well. Victor Laval is taking that narrative and doing something completely wondrous with it. And so I love folks from different backgrounds coming to a genre that by its nature is about subversion and is about asking questions from different perspectives. So it lends itself very, very well to giving voice to marginalized voices because it's kind of at the crux of it.
Incredible. Sorry, I was just like searching the author names of the books that I've read. I'm like, I don't know. It's that one. That one with those tropes. Yeah. Classically, I was also a Poe kid. We had like a shed in the back of our yard. And this is in bright, sunny Southern California. But anytime it would rain, and on the very rare thunderstorms occasions, I would take out our super old copy of Edgar Allan Poe short stories, go out to the shed, and just like read out there and just be creepy, and then creep myself out super and run back in the house and all of that. But so Poe will always hold a special place in my heart. For the classics, Shirley Jackson. I took a Gothic lit class in college, and it just like blew my mind. I am so in love with her and everything she writes. More modern stuff, The Alchemy of Moonlight by David Ferraro. It's a queer Gothic romance. A+.
That one's good,
I think it's a YA, so if you're not super into spice, that's also great. Otherwise, I just finished The Gentleman and His Vowsmith by Rebecca Ide. And it's also queer Gothic romance, a little spicier, but it has all the same beats, all the same tropes, and it was just like, it was everything to satisfy that need for Gothic literature, but more modern without like some of the more problematic aspects of older literature. Loved it.
So yeah, a lot of the same. Mexican Gothic was like A+. So good. Hacienda's on my list. I haven't gotten there yet.
Silvia Moreno Garcia has been writing for a really, really long time, and so it's really, really nice to see a book of hers like finally break through with Mexican Gothic. And it's so that it's really thrilling. These are all writers who've been doing things for a while, and I'm really glad that finally that readership is gaining traction for them because they all deserve it for sure.
Oh, yes, for sure.
One author that I've read so many of her short stories in the horror genre, I forget that she wrote other things, is Edith Wharton. I've exclusively read, I think, her horror stories. Ambrose Bierce, amazing, love him. M.R. James, because these are more like short story writers typically, but they wrote a lot for the Christmas season as well, because in England, Christmas was the time to tell ghost stories. So you'll start seeing a lot of those come out. I'm trying to think, what are some other ones? Well, right now we're reading Vampires of El Norte, which is, I can't remember the author, but it's in that same vein, which is how we found it.
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of Mexican writers, which is fantastic. Some Asian writers too. I was just looking through them today, but I haven't read them yet.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Can I ask you a question of like, what's your favorite Gothic, either Gothic trope or ghost or urban legend trope of like what is the like of all of the things that you have studied and written about, like, do you have favorite entities, or like, I love a woman in white story, or I love a Spirit of the Crossroads, or whatever, any of those kinds of things?
I was just going to say the White Lady. Yeah. And for some reason, the hauntings of women's bathrooms seems to be
very popular.
Very popular. Was not expecting that when we started our Haunted Michigan journey.
Nope.
But it turns out ghosts love ladies' bathrooms. But I really love, and I did kind of like a hyper-focused deep dive into white ladies across the world. And the lady in white is such, every region has their lady in white, or lady in brown, lady in blue. There's always a lady that's in some kind of color. And she's always very mysterious, or like Resurrection Mary in Chicago, like she will get into your car most specifically if you're a lone male driving at night.
I love her.
And you ask and stop for a ride, she will get in your car.
She's in this book.
Oh, good.
I love her.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I love her.
I haven't gotten to that part yet.
That's all right. She's so great. I mean, come on. Her name is Resurrection Mary. That's the best name
It's the
for
best
a ghost
name.
ever. And it comes from Resurrection Cemetery, where she was, where whoever she was supposedly buried. There's many different historic Marys that could be that Mary. So we talk about that too.
Mary.
I know Mary was a really popular name at the time, but like it's wild how many Marys could be died around the same time to be called Resurrection Mary. It's like a epidemic of
truly
Mary. So I really love just the white lady trope. Everybody has it. She's always very mysterious, but she is still somehow, even without a name, even when she doesn't have a name like Mary, she's still definitely her own person without being a person.
Yeah.
And I just love that it's something that no matter the culture that I looked into, like we all share the lady in white. We all share the lady in blue or whatever color she happens to show in. Like we always have a connection through a lady in white.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that is like anything that becomes like a global thing is kind of amazing.
What's your favorite?
I like haunted houses, I would say. I'm a big believer in the spirit of place, which is very atmospheric.
Yes.
I've worked in some very atmospheric places. Crazy Wisdom Bookstore is definitely one we've talked about on the podcast.
Nice. Yes.
Is somewhat infamous at this point. So yeah, I'm really into the atmospheric.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes, the atmosphere for me is always, because I feel like one of those things that can also then create a haunting, because I talk about this a lot in both books. When a building looks haunted, it just kind of becomes haunted sort of by proxy.
Yeah.
And because people want to like put it like that just looks like it has to be a haunted house. And it was very funny to me, the ones where I was like, surely someone has made like Lyndhurst Manor, which is in upstate New York. It's near Sleepy Hollow, actually. So when I say upstate, that's a New York City thing of like just anything north of the Bronx. But but
yeah.
sorry, it's such an ism. But so Lyndhurst Manor was used in the two Dark Shadows films as where the location was used, and so I just thought that, well, this has to be haunted because it's this historic Gothic architecture manor, and nothing came up, and I was like, wow, I can't. I put it in the book, but like, this should be haunted, and it isn't. But I'm putting it here because I think it should be because of its association to these spooky films.
Right.
And so it sometimes can become this weird dialogue with the people who are looking and thinking. But also, I'm not going to say there's a ghost there when there's not. There's not.
Yet.
Yet. I'm going to haunt Lyndhurst Manor. I'm just going to say, I'm moving in here now. I had no tie to this in life other than enjoying visiting.
Well,
So
other
now
than
it's
you
mine.
thought that should be haunted, and you were like, well, I'm going to make it haunted.
Well,
Yeah, make it
be
happen.
the ghost you want to see in the world.
oh, that's incredible.
I want to make that a T-shirt.
Right? New merch idea.
Amazing merch ideas. Great. Those are both A+ tropes. Thank you for
You're
those.
welcome. You're welcome.
And we've definitely encountered them in Washtenaw County.
Yes.
We've written a few in our book, Ypsilanti Ghosts and Legends.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
for sale outside, and you should get it. you should procure it and get it signed because it's
We need
magnificent.
you with us all the time because we
I'm
are really
here.
bad
I'm
at
sorry. We
plugging.
live under the thumb of capitalism. We got to do what we got to do.
Yeah.
You're it's good.
gotta
That's
do.
a-
We
that's a
gotta
good
do it.
Talk
point.
up each other's
That's a
books.
good point.
We do.
We'll
Well,
exchange.
that's. I mean, we are right now in a wonderful time where storytelling is something that can be. I think the power of story and storytelling has never been more important because a lot of times this storytelling is how we keep the truth alive, actually. And this is interesting as someone who also writes fiction, but I think the storytelling in a nonfiction capacity right now, to have these books that are trying to track the real history. Because the internet is hallucinating right now. The internet is full of things that are not true. So we're trying to actually go back to like libraries like this that have actual historic records. Here, thank you for that, because it's like there is the truth of historic record that's in places like this. So the storytelling about them to get folks to engage with this, I think it's never been more important.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
And indeed, history is often stranger than fiction. So whatever
Very
gets made
true.
up,
It
I
is.
bet
it is.
you.
There's
Very true.
a chapter in this book called Elena and the Count, and it is about a man who stole a woman's corpse and lived with it for 9 years as his
Yup.
bride, and it really happened. And I was
did.
describing details of this, and my friend was like, "Oh, yeah, for your next fiction, then what a villain!" And I was like, "No, that really happened."
No.
no, that one. And they were like, no. And I was like, my editor, if I was trying to present this as an actual fiction, my editor would have stopped me 5 unbelievable things ago,
Yes.
let alone. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was really hard to know where to start with that one. I start the chapter going, I don't know where to start with the 9 years of a corpse bride herself, of the airplane that was never finished that was meant to cure tuberculosis from space, the statute of limitations on a corpse bride,
Which exists, by the way. There is a
evidently.
statute
So,
of limitations on it.
Yeah. So there have definitely this was both a fun and maddening thing to research. In fact, I got so upset about the Elena and the Count chapter that I had to go write fiction where the fiction brought a haunting of spectral justice to a man who never faced any consequences in life. In truth, there was no consequences for what happened, and I got really mad about it. I got so mad about it I couldn't sleep until I wrote a ghost haunting him as
Good.
like vengeance. And so that's also the power of fiction, is that sometimes it can right the wrongs of history. At least after I got really, really ghost mad, then I could sleep.
Ghost mad. Incredible.
My new favorite phrase.
My new favorite. Ghost mad.
Ghost mad. Nothing like spectral vengeance.
That's true.
That's one of my favorite
Absolutely.
tropes.
That's so
That's
true.
true.
Well,
That
for
I
who
do like
deserves it.
that.
For who deserves it.
Yep.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
I like a good
Yeah.
justice story.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
it. Well, and ghost lore really often can provide that.
Yeah.
It really can.
Anybody else? What was this talk? No. So yeah, books are being sold along with what's called Pandora's Pets.
Yes.
So I'm here with my partner Tom, and he has created these wonderful little sculptures that are meant to take a worry that you have and worry about it for you. And they come out of this kind of concept of the idea of putting a thought form. So going back to the idea of tulpa, of like putting a thought form into something, of something that is upsetting you, sometimes offshoring it onto something else, can be a great way to engage and also like healing. So it's been very therapeutic for us to make these fun little critters that seem like they're out of sort of a Jim Henson workship, that are basically meant to kind of take any weight that you have in your heart and like hold it for you in a way that's like whimsical, but and also too can be celebratory for something. So it's so he's with me and my help in this wing of my book tour because we're going all over the place from here. Our next stop is going to Ohio to talk about one of several chapters I have about the parts where I grew up and the college I went to too. So so that any engaging with Pandora's Pets or with his wonderful art, it helps fund the rest of this self-funded book tour. So
it does. So go check us out. We'll
Thank
be
you.
out there.
Thanks, friends.
Thank you
This
so
is
much.
you
for
so
one more round of applause.